This episode is an absolute masterclass in one, this podcast, and then two, all things Maya. As a long-term producer of this show, which has intrinsically made me a long-term listener and fan, I cannot tell you how a lot of the themes that come through in this podcast overall are brought together in this episode. My favorite teaching from Maya is long productivity, a concept that I think she introduced to me maybe in 2022 or 3 on this podcast. You'd have to go back and find it. But this episode has taught me how that is only one part of getting an entire year to kind of fit together. So if you've been paying attention for more than 12 months or even 6, you'll notice that this podcast is quite cyclical in nature. And so Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 all have their own themes. And each year, Maya dives deeper into what these mean, progresses ideas, progresses thoughts. But what's abundantly obvious in this episode is how she actually naturally applies this to her own life. So some context on the episode, I challenged Maya to record a part at the end of every single quarter. So the first part was submitted to me on the 27th of March, the next one towards the end of June, so on and so forth. I'm recording this having not listened to the Q4 part yet, so I'm excited to almost have this wrapped up in the way that I expect it to, but with some twists and turns on learning a little bit more about what Maya does. But here are some themes I think I would like you to pay attention to if it's not overtly obvious to you on the first listen. So 1, work-life balance. You'll notice that in Q1, Maya is actively setting her intentions for balance, literally planning the year. By Q2, she's brought this into more actionable steps where she's going or beginning to go into that rejuvenation period of figuring this stuff out. And by Q3, she's already reflecting on the implementation of a lot of these strategies and reaping the benefits of having set a long-term goal. And actually a subtle thing that I've only noticed while recording this intro is that in Q1, she's talking about how getting the driveway done or preparing the house has been a very, very long-term project. But by Q3, the house is now being used, or her home is now being used to host social events. And all the sprinklings in between of what made that possible, I think, is one of the most important things that you can take away from this episode. Now, when I say long productivity is not everything, having listened multiple times now to each part in depth, something that you could easily miss is that, and I haven't told her to do this, Maya structures these episodes clinically, but I think by doing it naturally. So she talks about how she's doing personally first. She'll then dive into work, family, keeping her health and fitness in check, and then finally talking about social and her creativity, then summing it all up. Now, I think why you need to know that this is important is that these structured flows of her updates literally mirror her approach to having an organized life. By starting with a reflection, she grounds herself, makes herself self-aware, and then breaks her narrative down. And that kind of gradual build from internal to external themes, starting with her and then moving outwards, is an incredible insight, especially for me, into how her mindset influences her actions, her priorities, how she plans, and especially over a long period of time like this episode. Now, I have gone on for almost 5 minutes. It's not why you're here, it's not why you're listening, but I hope that this little insight will help this episode become more impactful now when you listen to it. Enjoy.
This is the Executive Coach podcast with me, Maya Goodker, where I help you tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, successful, and aligned with who you truly are. Having worked with hundreds of leaders, I know that when we're properly supported and with great prioritization and planning, we really can have it all with ease. So let's stop the overwork and dive in. So Arjun wanted me to record a bit of a time lapse, and the idea there is that because we do a reasonable amount of quarterly work in this podcast, the idea was to record something quarterly and then amalgamate that at the end of the year for some sort of a time lapse. And I love this idea. We're now in the final few days of March, and so I thought it would be interesting to share a low light or two. And it's also quite fitting of how I'm feeling at this very moment. And I think the beauty of time lapse is to sometimes capture these points in time, particularly when they're not, our best, or they're a bit sort of outside our norm. So March hasn't really been my finest month, I would say, and it kind of maybe got a little bit worse in the last few days. And it's one of those things where it's nothing huge, but it's enough to have you just feeling subpar and kind of a bit blah. And I had a nasty cold followed by this really strange and bad case of dry eye, which has been so debilitating that I've struggled to be able to go out for things. When I'm, on video conferencing, I'm sort of needing to blink a lot. But there are periods of time where I physically cannot keep my eyes open because they're so uncomfortable. So while I could cope with January and February, just typical winter months, I found March a little bit more trying. The ridiculous wetness and then this health stuff has just put me into this kind of low energy state. And when when it's uncomfortable just to keep your eyes open, I think you can feel really, really drained, and it's very limiting. Now, the beauty of the life that I have, or this working structure, is that what I need to do work-wise can actually still happen because I can have breaks between calls. I can decide to have those breaks between calls. And it's only really 1 or 2 days that I'm traveling on the tube, which is the bit I think that is the most irritating to dry eyes. There is a lot that can happen, I guess, from the mothership, the office and the home office, which means that I think I would be really frustrated if I hadn't been able to get on with my work. That would have just made me more stressed because, again, it's not like I can then just leave that stuff. I would have to do it at some other point, and that's always a stressful thought for any of us, isn't it? So that's kind of the main low light. And linked to that is just then not really feeling like I've been my usual energy levels, or the sort of energy levels that I like to have. I want to say should have, but we coaches don't love using the word should. And I feel like I want to be having a few more adventures, but then when I think about them, I feel anxious because then I imagine how I would do them with my eyes in the current state, where I can't really keep them open, especially if it's windy or dry, or I don't know what the environment's going to be like, the air, literally the quality of the air. So I just wanted to document this state that I'm in at the moment. I'm fed up. I wanted to be, I wanted to hibernate in winter and then be out and about. But I feel like this waterlogging in March, the weather, my eyes, silly colds, it's all stacked on top of each other. And, there are upsides to this. So it's forced me to be going out or going to my normal meetings without any makeup. And I wear makeup because I love it. It's not something that I need to wear to feel confident, but I like how I look when I wear makeup. And so not having it, but having maybe an outfit that I like because, I've been working on my wardrobe, actually not having it has been really liberating. I've had to go out on nights out without any alcohol. You do feel better the next day, inevitably. And trying to embrace those positives. And if I have to make some other lifestyle changes or, change my supplements or any other dietary things, I'm willing to give those things a try. So, questions from Urgent. What did you learn about this quarter that will impact how you approach the next? Well, this first quarter for me was about the organization. And so, that's been a necessary process, and it's kind of getting more into now systems thinking, where I have set up systems. It's been really, really valuable to the point where I've had some moments of calm, despite everything I've said above, where, when you have good systems, you free up time, right? And so I've had these moments where I'm like, oh gosh, maybe some back and forth that would have been occurring before because there's now a system in place doesn't happen. Next question is, have you any unfinished business left? Absolutely. So, if I look at my goals for the year, I haven't touched most of the house stuff. I'm really hoping to make a dent in that in Q2. And I do hope that when I hear this as part of a whole load of time lapses, I'm really hoping that we've seen that progress over the year. And then, do you have any slow productivity tasks that you can provide an update on? Well, I think this is interesting. So I've obviously mentioned the house. That's very much something that is pending. The other one will be that I kicked off the vision builder at the end of last year. Now there are 2 other pillars that have basically the same treatment awaiting. I'm delivering a workshop. I've delivered a workshop on the second pillar a few times now. So that's going to be fairly straightforward to turn into online curriculum that I can then coach around. And then there's a third pillar that I'm also having to deliver a workshop on soon. So I'm hoping that's going to make it a lot easier then to create that online curriculum. So if I could do all of that this year, then it's like, for me, that's quite a build, because I've taken something that is very much part of my framework, but I've crystallized it online. So that would be a slow productivity project, I guess. It's something that I'm not, rushing to do. I would want to give it the right time, really obsess over quality, make it high quality. But yeah, that's my update. There's going to be, hopefully you're going to hear this and then jump straight into the Q2 time-lapse update. So part 2 of this quarterly time lapse. So we're now approaching the end of the first half of the year. So we're approaching the end of June. And to me, that's quite momentous, because as we think about our goals, we can start to get a little bit distant from them by the midpoint of the year. The year's moving quite quickly. And so I thought it would be nice to share some personal stuff today, just like the first time lapse, and some reflections on what's working, what hasn't worked, and my thoughts for the third quarter as well, that kind of summer/September quarter. So just from a planning perspective, things that have worked or continue to work for me, the monthly reviews and the to-do list, really celebrating all the little achievements that happen and accumulate over the course of each month. I have been diligent in those. They are so joyful, and they never fail to surprise me in their length and magnitude. I've also really enjoyed reconnecting with the 1 Second Everyday app. I had an email from them saying I hadn't used it and they're about to delete all my stuff. So I promptly logged in, and I've just been enjoying adding to that when I have a spare moment. My weekly planning has also been successful. So the best time to do it is the Friday afternoon, as per Laura Vanderkam. What this does is it gets me ahead of the next week. There's always moving parts in the week, from kid logistics to work stuff that needs to be set up. So, is a group coaching session going ahead, or is there going to be somebody who can't attend it? Are we going to use the backup slot? Just thinking about all of that stuff in advance is really, really helpful on a Friday afternoon. I often find, though, that I'm not able to fully set my goals in that session. And I do still sometimes end up doing that on a Sunday night. The monthly planning is also good. So at the start of a month, say, okay, what are the real big goals? What are the top 3 goals of this month? It's not always easy to ask, but it's a forcing question, and it kind of helps give that clarity. And the same for quarterly planning. And I would say that it's because of that monthly planning and quarterly planning that we've managed to get our driveway done, which was this sort of final piece. There were a whole sequence of things that needed to happen on this front before we could do this. But it was a project in itself. And if it hadn't been for my monthly and quarterly planning in the busyness of these recent months, it would have definitely been lost on the wayside. But this quarterly planning really forces you to go back to what those big things are. And even though they might feel a little bit unachievable when you look out at a whole 90 days or a whole quarter, it's incredible when they are on your quarterly list, on your monthly list, and they make it onto your weekly list. It's amazing what happens. Now I can look out at this newly done driveway and feel like we've almost finished everything that we had set out to do when it came to the renovation. So, the podcast in the last 6 months, we've had some great new milestones, and I have been putting those on the monthly list and really celebrating those things that didn't feel like they were that achievable perhaps a year ago. And some mentions that we've had in various top C-suite lists and things like that. And then the masterclass that I created last year now is a fully blown in-person 3-hour workshop at London Business School for its alumni. And being able to take people through the vision builder and being able to then them walk away with their own vision ready and a plan ready to go has been really exciting. And then often being able to continue working with them in some way to support that vision. And really want to mention here the team. Like it's only been half a year since I've had this new team, as well as urging my podcast producer. I can't tell you how much it makes a difference and how much it motivates and energizes, and also supports and frees up my time to do the stuff that I should be doing. On the self front, just going to mention a couple of things. The wardrobe, that work has been going very well. It doesn't feel like a drag, doesn't feel like confusing so much anymore. I've had some good moments. I've had some moments where I've just felt like, oh, this is really working. And the biggest thing for me is realizing that actually the stuff that I like is quite simple, and it doesn't take much to then jazz it up with a bit of jewelry. Um, and then on the relationships front, we've been doing a few really lovely things. So on Sunday afternoons, we've been having people over for tea, and the kids have been loving this. So, all those times that you meet people and you're like, we should really get you over, or we should do something on the weekends. And we finally sat down and actually made that happen with my husband. And I think it's just been nice because the kids are a little bit older now. So they really enjoy engaging with our adult friends and also often the kids of those adults. We're probably not going to be like the dinner party people, but the afternoon tea slot, wow, that one's really doable because, you can make a nice masala chai, you can get some snacks. My daughter does some baking, and hey presto, you've got a relaxed afternoon. In terms of other relational stuff from a friendship perspective, I've been trying to keep a certain day of the week more clear. So I have in my scheduler that day is not available. And that has freed me up to be able to do random things with my friends that have more calendar flexibility. And we've also managed to do some stuff as a family on a more regular basis, like going to play badminton together and then take a last minute long weekend. And I would say I have been swept up in the sort of park run energy of my husband and his family and my son, and that's been a really cool family activity to get together. So those are a few updates. What hasn't happened? So I think one of the reasons why this has been a great quarter is because my eyes that were super dry have been a lot better, and that was a really bad point last quarter, at the end of the quarter. And so just feeling healthy and appreciating what it is to just be healthy has just honestly been the biggest joy. And so putting that aside, though, I think we're at a point in the year now where there is so much admin. The kids have not just the sports days, not just the concerts, but they'll have other weekend activities. They'll have extra morning assemblies, extra concerts. And, we've really done our best to minimize what they do in terms of activities, have a really clear policy around only really doing local activities. So we've done everything possible to keep this stuff manageable, whilst also obviously enabling their interests. But I think what happens is it all just comes together in June and it is insane. And there is so much admin that I feel I could be a full-time admin. And not only that, but we then have the admin of figuring out their summer holidays as well. So I certainly feel very busy because also what happens is the work stuff gets crunched up around this time as well. We're going to have some trips. So I think overall, I would love to not be feeling quite so busy, and I'm probably on slightly higher alert than I would like. So therefore, my hopes for Q3 are that, this is cool busy. Like I enjoy the stuff we're doing. It's really great. And I would like to enjoy that from a perspective of, abundance and fun, and perhaps have less feelings of busyness. I also then want the Q3 to feel really a different pace, very slow, relaxed. So that's the kind of vibe that I would like for at least, July and August, and then September will probably feel very different. And what we've actually done is record a lot of content up front over those months. So from a podcast perspective, I will get some time for some creative rejuvenation, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think it's so important when you're producing something on a weekly and often more than weekly basis that you have time for complete and utter switch off. This is a creative pursuit for me, and to really be able to fuel that with proper breaks, but also create that consistency in the output, which is something that Urgent has encouraged me to do. As well as the that kind of creative rejuvenation, I would like to have some sort of a 10-minute therapeutic decluttering daily project. I like the idea that by the end of the summer, the house isn't kind of heaving and groaning with all the busyness having accumulated, but some way of almost having lightened it during the summer. Maybe, and I know I'm sounding very naive here, but maybe I've even included the kids in that process. I've already started to drop some hints to them about some sort of summer principles that we're going to have in place to make it operate a little bit more smoothly in the summer. Really actually taking from our weekends, which is that they don't have screens before 4 o'clock, and then taking from the lazy genius, she says tidy before screen. So we've been doing a bit of that. So before they then go and have their screen time, that they tidy up. So whether that's in the shared area or it could be their bedroom, but they are suddenly hugely motivated to do that when they know they've got the screen on the other side of that. So I'm thinking of just having that in the summer, I guess. The final thing is that if I was able to maybe find 2 days of complete blank slate, I would like to think about recording some more of my curriculum. I've done one pillar, which is the vision builder, but I've got 2 other pillars. But it feels like a little bit of a big project at a time when I kind of just want to go there and not do anything that requires too much extra brain power. So I'm going to put that out there here and see whether I either am able to do some planning for that, do some setup, get some support in doing that, and see whether I can find a way of making that happen in a way that doesn't stop my easy vibe and doesn't prevent me from having the kind of deep rejuvenation that I want this summer. So I'm going to leave it there, and I look forward to sharing the third of these updates in a few months' time. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, I found a dance class as well. So that's provided both a little bit of activity, but most importantly, that super fun hobby thing in a social context, and very much ticking that box of One Night for You by Laura Vanderkam. So that's the final update, and I look forward to sharing the third of these updates in a few months' time, towards the end of September. All right, bye-bye. So this is the third of the quarterly time-lapse updates. We are at the end of the third quarter of the year and already actually into the fourth quarter. So as I'm recording this, we're into October. And I thought I would do a quick update of where I am, current kind of mood, and how I am, I guess, thinking about the rest of the year, and then some specific updates on goals. So this is quite a personal episode. So in terms of current mood, we have a trip coming up in a couple of weeks, and so I'm both excited about that, a little bit nervous. It is a safari trip, and so there is a lot involved in terms of getting jabs and the anti-malarials and just quite a bit of prep, and that always does, I do find that a little bit nerve-wracking, but we've been sort of planning it in advance. And I think once all of that is done, then you can just sit back and enjoy the whole experience. So I am looking forward to that. From a work perspective, I have to say my September has been really great, because often at this time of year, it's when a lot of the programs that I coach on are running. But my work has shifted slightly more to the corporate high-end one-to-one clients. So a typical day for me will sometimes be a 2-hour coaching session with one of my corporate clients, and that will be virtual. So I will have been able to get a walk-in, some exercise, do some other bits and pieces work-related, but then that kind of chunky 2-hour stretch is what my day looks like. And then it's about after school, being with the kids and things like that. And that's been really grounding, having a lot of that. Currently, my clients include Sony, British Airways, Marks and Spencer, AXA. So I have really enjoyed not needing to rush into town in a week kind of multiple times. I'll probably have one day in town where I'm coaching in person. And I've actually made, from my MBAs, I've actually made a lovely friend, and we met, and she's from India. And we just connected over a lot of our passions and things that we feel really strongly about when it comes to women, and especially recent events around violence against women and things like that. And it doesn't happen often, but I met her for coffee, and we ended up having like a 2.5-hour coffee where we kind of put the world to rights. And it was just so inspiring. Every now and then, I think it's just so great when you can meet somebody, connect with them, and actually continue the dialogue with them. A slight diversion, but in terms of what my work life looks like right now, it has been really good. And what it has enabled me to do as well, having these sort of amazing clients, is that I've got more energy to be able to do things in the evening. So I've had the Kundalini yoga on a weekly basis, my dance class that I go to, which is great choreography on a weekly basis. And now we've moved into the festival of Navratri, where we go for Garba. So that has been an evening activity. And so I think for me, the way that I'm wired is that I don't like to be sort of on the go all day, every day. So when I do have more stuff going on in the evenings, then it's good to be working from home more regularly for me. So that has been quite grounding. Just a couple of other things on the work front, which I think maybe as listeners you would appreciate, is that something really meaningful for me is that Laura Vanderkam has invited me to guest on her podcast, and her other guests that she's been sharing about recently, because this is a new thing that she's doing on her Before Breakfast podcast, which is a pretty huge podcast. Other guests have included Cal Newport. So that's just a really personally meaningful achievement for me. It's something that perhaps if I was to just like go to a school event and just chat to somebody random, they would have no idea. Even, to be honest, like some of my own friends and family probably wouldn't necessarily appreciate how meaningful that is. But for example, you know, the minute that I had found out that this was on the table, I'd obviously messaged my producer Arjun, and we had a little celebration. We also had Mira on the podcast, which was really great just for the show in general, and having exposure to new listeners. My son actually asked me recently, he's like, Mummy, well, when are you going to stop doing the podcast? It was very clear to me when he asked me that I have no intention. I have no sort of idea or thinking around this thing ever ending. To me, it just gets more and more momentum and more confidence. We keep trying different things. We haven't stuck to one format. We've done daily episodes this year. We've done weekly episodes, and we've really had a lot of fun trying different things. The biggest thing, though, when it comes to the sustainability of this podcast, though, is that this is the first year that I've had completely cold listeners who are outside my networks or referral networks coming in to then do client work with me. In previous years, this was working in the sense that somebody who knew me would refer somebody to me, and they would then get to know me via the podcast and then choose to work with me. But this year, the people that have connected with me and have come into my client world are people often that I don't even have a single shared connection with on LinkedIn. So the podcast is doing new and better things, I guess, each year. And it is showing me what's possible when it comes to having a business, a coaching business, and then a podcast, and how the two work so symbiotically together. And then having the team this year has been incredible. My amazing online business manager, Kylie, has just transformed my own experience. We are still just finalizing the curriculum that I recorded in the summer, which again is a great sort of thing to have got out of the way this summer amidst everything else that was going on. And now that is just being uploaded into the platform so that people can start using it. As it is, just having those videos, finally, things that I talk about so regularly with my clients, having those has been amazing, because we'll sometimes be in a session and they'll raise one of these issues. I'll be like, I'll just send you the video on that. And then they're able to digest that outside our coaching time, and we can focus the coaching time on making stuff that is specifically, relevant to them, and unpacking stuff specific to them, and those teaching elements they can do in their own time, and therefore get more out of the coaching. So that has all worked out really well. I'm conscious I've gone on quite a lot about work now, so I just want to wrap that bit up and just say a few other updates. So the home front, okay, again, this was something where I had quite a lot that I wanted to do this year, both in terms of actual works like front and back sort of driveways and things like that. So real projects, but then also internally like decluttering, getting to the point where I've actually been able to purchase product, as they say on the home edit, and get all those boxes to organize, clear containers to organize the junk drawer, make the junk drawer actually look appealing. So far it has maintained itself for a good month, but I am still sort of waiting to see how that continues to unfold. And then some other projects in terms of getting more stuff on the walls, because I think this is that long tail of a house project, is that you don't kind of nail everything in one go, because you'll travel somewhere, you'll pick something up, you'll want to get that on the wall. But then most importantly, I think we've really brought the house to life this year by having people over. So we've found our window, the Sunday afternoon chai. It seems to work really well for us, our friends, especially if they've got families. It's quite a nice low key way to host. I have also done some dinner parties. So I think that's also such an important part, like, of cultivating a lovely home, is to then have people in it, and the kids, they want to know who we're going to have over next. And it's just been a nice part of the experience. So it's like, yes, we care about the space, but actually it's about bringing it to life by having people here. So that's my personal update. I hope it's been of some interest to you. And I'm interested to see how Origin is going to be able to stitch all of these together. I guess what it will require is one final time lapse. That'll be the fourth one that I will do at the end of this quarter. And then we will tie it all together and we'll share it as an episode. So I look forward to hearing how all of that goes. Bye-bye. So welcome back to the fourth time lapse. If you're still here, hats off to you. I will do my best to keep this brief. We're now into December, but November was such a whirlwind. It was quite intensely social, lots of outings in the evenings, an intense period. And so I had to go back to my planner and look at the intentions I'd set for October and refresh myself. I think that can easily happen when we're living those really busy, extroverted phases of our lives. When there's a high level of activity, it can be easy to forget what happened and what happened prior to that phase, and we can lose a sense of where we are. And so that's why I think these reflections, taking time to take stock of things, is so important. It's grounding, it reinforces, consolidates memory. I think it can make the difference between that phrase of like, oh, time just flew by and look, your kids are all grown up now, versus, no, I took time to take stock and savor it, and I don't feel like I blinked and everything just went by, and I don't feel robbed of that time. So I think it really can make the difference between being able to savor time and feel like it's just rushing by. So I did go back to my October intentions, and they were really simple. One was just to enjoy our trip to Kenya, which I had been a bit anxious about. And it was a very eventful trip. Lots of incredible things happened, and some were a bit more challenging. Overall, it was exactly the type of lifetime experience with my family, including my parents who did grow up there. It was exactly what we were looking for, the adventure and just being in a completely different continent and allowing my kids to experience it. That I think was super special. What I've done is I have condensed the pictures down. I'm not making albums right now. That's not kind of on my radar, but I have uploaded those into a digital picture frame. I've got one also for my parents that will become a Christmas present, where I will preload the best of pictures in there, and so they can just enjoy those. I found it to be a really nice way to enjoy the pictures very quickly after we got back, rather than having to take time to make an album, send that off, and then receive that, and then that be lying in a book. It's just there in the kitchen for us to enjoy one picture at a time. It's also got me thinking more about which of those photos, especially the SLR ones, I actually may want to do something else with, because they're standing the test of time. They're the ones that really stand out. So that was October. It was also the festival of Navratri. So we went out dancing a lot, got dressed up in Indian clothes. So it was a lot of soulful cultural activity, going back to my Kenyan roots, going and doing the Indian dancing. And we came back to a really hectic November. But we were on Kenyan timing, so we were waking up earlier, and that seemed to create a lot of space. So, for example, I managed to integrate things like face yoga, some breath work into my day and into my mornings that I had been struggling to do before that. And I do think this is worth paying a bit of attention to. So, on my 2024 list, I'm not necessarily going to call this a goals list, because it had a lot of things that I really was keen to try out or integrate or bring into my life, rather than really outcome focused goals. But every time I looked at that list before November, I kept thinking, this just isn't happening. Like, I'm not scratching the surface of face yoga. I don't really understand how it works. Somehow it took being away for a couple of weeks, coming back on a different time zone to really make that space. And I do think this is the power of a year-long list, right? The amount that gets done, even when you're right at the end of that year, you can be having items on there that just, I wasn't too bothered if it didn't happen or not. I was very loose with these. They'd kind of all fallen out of a visualization I'd done. I wasn't bothered if they happened or not. but I did keep seeing them. I kept knowing that I wanted them to still be on the list. And when the time was right, they happened. And I think that is something that I am going to remember as I consider next year and how I'm going to set that up. And I think the other thing is just to think back now. I'm in December, to think back to March Maya, who was really struggling with those eyes, who was feeling quite bleak about it. I'd had to go out for drinks with my husband and basically keep my eyes closed. They were so uncomfortable. 9 months on, these things, quality of life shifts. And whilst a bad cold will kind of put me back into that place, I know how to manage it. With chronic things, I think there can be this really long period where you're trying all of the things and nothing seems to be working. And then there's this sort of turning point when it kind of improves. So, I like the idea that in this 1 hour or this one chunk of time, we've got different selves of Maya over the course of the year that can kind of talk to each other. The other thing I just want to touch on at this point in the year that I can now look back at the whole year and say has really worked for me is the Calendly scheduling and having the Thursday off. I'll do a deeper dive into this, but this year is the first year that I've given myself a really clear day off since having my business. Mondays are no meetings days, but Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday are my client days. And the way I've set that up is based on something that Rose Radford, my business coach, who is coming onto the podcast next year, she had inspired this. And what is quite amazing is that Thursday has allowed so much richness into my life, whether it's meeting a friend, whether it's going and meeting my dad for a coffee, or whether it's bumping into my 87-year-old friend in the street and going back to her house for a coffee because it was something that I'd been meaning to get around to, but I needed to sort of schedule the time with her and get in touch. And this was just something spontaneous that happened. And I love the idea that I can make space for a bit more of that spontaneity on that day. And so what I've said is that day is basically for friends, family, and finance. And those things will take priority. That's not to say work things won't happen on that day. I've got a big talk coming up on a Thursday. When I was struggling to find space to fit Laura Vanderkam in before I went to Kenya, the Thursday was the free day. So it allowed space for that. So it also can work in that way. Like having a deliberately empty day can also help sometimes when those bigger things do come along. So that has been a nice reflection. And I do think it's important to add that this has not come at the expense of the business. This is a year where my revenues have grown. And so what I feel has happened is that is optimized energy, given me a better schedule to the week. But it has come at a time when I have been able to expand in various areas in the business, which don't just require my time. So I am obviously quite excited to take note of that. I say watch this space. I am keen to almost take that quite a lot further next year. I am still mulling over how I'm going to do goals. I'm having a goal-free December just to really embrace that period of kind of cocooning and what we call contraction after a lot of expansion this year. But just from a work perspective, I think it can be easy to forget at this point great things that have happened in the first part of the year. And it took me going to the mastermind with my fellow business coach, with my fellow coaches, where I took us through a reflection. So we did a guided reflection of the year, and then we did hot seats where we were looking forward. And it took me going to that and really brainstorming some of the business stuff that had happened in the year to fully appreciate that. It's not all good. Like in the last week or so, I have found out that a major client that I thought I was taking on next year, which was going to involve some cool travel, I had scheduled the hard landscape around that a bit. I'd made space for it by saying no to other things. I found out that's not happening. And so that was a little bit of a knock. I must say I wasn't sort of overly upset, but it was one of those things that had various knock-on impacts. And so it was really nice to then go and meet my mastermind, which is filled of other people doing work similar to me, but also doing mindset work, subconscious reprogramming, and to kind of be with them and then walk away from that feeling like this has only opened up space for other things and feeling really optimistic and positive. It also reminds me of a phrase that I've just been listening to on another podcast, which is what will come to me will come, and what I need to let go of, I let go of. So it's that sort of sense of like ease with what comes and what goes and being okay with that rather than maybe trying to push or force things. Because surrender was actually also on my 2024 list, like having more of a state of surrender. And I can certainly say that my reaction to this client thing was very much more in line with surrender and not taking it personally, which I easily could have, the way it was done, etc. I could have easily taken it more personally. So I think that's a great personal win as well. The other really nice thing that we discussed in the mastermind was this need for contraction and expansion. It's something I've been reading about as I think about goal-free living, and really noticing that I need a phase now of contraction after lots happening, being out in the world, lots of travel. And I really need that sort of inward time. December, I think, couldn't be a better time for all of that. My kids are into it as well. These sort of more restful weekends, candlelit baths, doing puzzles. And I do think that there is, I've also got a solstice event. So I'm going to go with somebody to a solstice event, which I'm really looking forward to mark the shortest day of the year. So that's, alongside trying to keep up physical activity. Like I've got this run coming up and I'm trying to figure out ways to do the running because my beloved woods are very waterlogged at the moment. But maybe finding other ways as well, like swimming, to kind of keep the stamina up. So that's kind of where I am going into this December, really hoping that it is a bit of a contrast, enjoying the contrast between some of the busier months. It's not that there won't be things happening, but there'll be less at night. And I'm hoping that there will be a bit more breathing space in between them and time for more slow, more contraction, more of that inward time with immediate family and having that kind of more relaxed time together. And I think that is all that I want to say. We're going to have some episodes about reviewing the word of the year and also a specific goal, the wardrobe goal, doing more of a deep dive into that and how that worked and what was successful in that. And I think looking back on this time lapse, not exactly knowing why we did it, but we were just experimenting. For me, what I think has been good is that you will have heard, those of you who are long-time listeners, weekly episodes, sometimes daily episodes this year. But this is a bit of the behind the scenes. What's my experience been like? What's been working? What's not been working? Some stuff which perhaps you need a little bit of distance from to be able to share a bit more about. So I hope that has been of interest to you. And I hope that you also get to do your December reflections and perhaps you can share those with others or journal about those. And I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Life Work with Maya. If you've got to this point, I'm guessing you found it valuable. So do share the link with somebody else who can benefit. In an age of materialism and us trying to stay on top of clutter, what could be nicer than to send a non-clutter digital link to somebody and say, I listened to this and I thought you might love it. What a great way to show your care and consideration for them. If you haven't left a review, now is the time, and make sure that you are subscribed on Spotify or you're following along on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help the show grow, then do share the link on IG stories, Instagram stories, or reshare or discuss your thoughts with my LinkedIn posts. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Do feel free to send me messages there. I love having dialogue with my listeners, and the links to those handles are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.